We'll look two concepts in light, the reflection of light using plane mirrors in this set of videos. We start with the formation of two images when they are inclined at right angle to each other. So you have two mirrors and they're kept at right angle to each other. How many images are formed and what is the process by which it forms? We know that due to reflection there are rays which emanate from a point, they get reflected, and according to the law of reflection the angle of they get reflected with the angle of incidence being equal to angle of reflection. And we also know that these virtual images which are formed inside the mirror are formed as a result of extending these rays into the mirror. So we've done a question in the assignment 2. We'll be using those principles to find this out. There's one more, which is what happens in the case of parallel mirrors. The mirrors are kept parallel to each other. I'll let you look at that by yourself once you understood this thing. So let's get into it. We have a mirror XY which is placed horizontally. Another mirror XZ which is placed vertically. So these you can see are at right angle to each other. You can see that they are at 90 degrees to each other. Right. Now there is an observer who's shown as an eye somewhere between these two mirrors. Now what happens is that these mirrors by themselves will be reflected by each other. So what I mean by that is that the mirror XY will be reflected in XZ, and you will have a virtual mirror for XY which is called XY1. So XY1, I put it as a thinner line, is a virtual mirror of XY. Right, it gets reflected in mirror XZ for the observer. So the rays will, so if you look at it, light falls on it, the rays will come back and hit the user's eye, and this is the virtual mirror that you have. Similarly, XZ, that is a vertical mirror, will be reflected in the horizontal mirror, and you will have another mirror which is called as XZ1. So XZ and the virtual mirror is XZ1. Now let's take a point. The point is O, it's an object O, and let's see how many images are formed before we look at how it's formed. Right. So the object O first gets reflected on this mirror XY, so that will be formed at an equal distance from O. So the image will be formed inside the mirror XY at a distance equal to at a distance which is equal to the distance between the object O and the mirror XY. So let's see that. So there's that. So that's the distance. So this distance and this distance is the same. So object O become so the image of object O on the mirror the reflection of object O in the mirror XY results in image I1. Similarly, in the vertical mirror XZ, object O becomes I2 and it's equidistant. Right. So these are the two images which are formed. Now there are two more images which are formed. I'll tell you how. Now you have this image I1 and you have this virtual mirror XZ1. And what happens is that this image becomes a virtual object for this particular mirror and it gets reflected inside. What do I mean? So I1, you'll find that there will be an image I3 which is as a result of I1 becoming a virtual object. It's a virtual object because it doesn't exist, it's actually an image, but there's also a virtual mirror here, and that as a result you will have one more image which is from I3, and similarly I2 becomes a virtual object for the mirror XY1 and you will have another image I4. So there are four images which are formed due to this single object which is kept between the two mirrors which are kept at right angle to each other, and two of these images coincide. So I1 is an image, I2 is an image, but I3 and I4 coincide at the same point. So the observer will thus see three images. So the observer will thus see three images. Now let's construct how these images are formed using what I said using the concept from the last week's assignment, wherein a point P has two rays emanating. Let's look at how these rays get reflected, and you are having this, you're stretching these rays the reflected rays into the mirror, and where they coincide, you have the image. So for each of these images, which is I1, I2, I3 and I4, we'll use the same principle of reflection and then stretching the reflected rays into the mirror and finding out the image.